started chit-chatting. Well, in the event somebody is watching this, my name is Melissa. I am from the University of Pittsburgh, the Adapted Driving Program. We are actually at Pitt, not UPMC. So if you go into UPMC website, you will not find us. You have to go through the University of Pittsburgh. So I know we had some questions, some discussion, but I'm going to kind of take us back to the beginning, go over the services we provide, the range of services, what does our evaluation look like. I'll go over different types of equipment that we have, our training process, our training schedule, our sessions, and then if you have any questions, definitely more than happy to answer that. So as I said before, I'm really excited to be here. As I said, this program's been around for 20 years. I'm fairly new to it. I came in December of 2022, so just about 3 years. I'll tell you a little bit about myself also in a second. And when I got here, what I saw is we didn't have a website, so people didn't know we existed, in part because we didn't have a website. So we now have a website. So I found that lack of website, people didn't know, UPMC physicians didn't know, people in Pittsburgh were traveling to Johnstown or beyond for driver rehab services, and we were right here in their own backyard. So I really made it my mission to get that website created and to get out into the community every which way possible, from Pittsburgh, north, south, west, east, to really spread the word. So spread the word, share the word. If you do know of other opportunities, like we just were discussing, where it'd be beneficial for us to be involved, please let us know, because I think driving is so important. A lot of people have something happen where they think they can't drive anymore. They then sit at home, and we know nobody wants to sit at home and have no life anymore. Getting out, doing things that you want to do, have to do, enjoy doing is really, really important to health and to wellness and to well-being. So if we can get people to know we exist, and sometimes literally this is like the one thing that makes the difference between somebody not being able to drive and being able to drive. Like, this is it, right? So if we can get the word out that we exist, and get people back on the road just so that they can continue to lead meaningful, purposeful lives, that's kind of my big mission, shall you say. So a little bit about me. I'm actually an occupational therapist by background. I worked in acute care. When I say acute care, we covered all different floors of hospitals, from ortho to cardiac, ICU. We also had an acute mental health unit. We had a NICU. We did some mom and baby cases. We had a skilled nursing, and we also had a rehab unit. So I had a very diverse background from the phys rehab standpoint. I also did a little bit in home health, just for fun, just on the side. And I also did some adjunct teaching over at the University of Scranton. I went to college there, stayed in that area before moving here to Pittsburgh. After about 18 years in the hospital, I took a little bit of a change in career paths. I got involved in academics, so I became the director of an occupational therapy assistant program and literally developed the program from the ground up. I was given a desk and said, build it. So we developed the program, and it still exists today. However, during my time in academics, I came across driver rehab, and I learned a little bit more about it, took some free continuing ed, and kind of found it fascinated me. And when I realized that when I was a practicing occupational therapist, I talked to people about, can you get in and out of a car, which is important, but I never really thought about, can they drive, right? So I worked with amputees where they probably went to rehab before they went home, but they went home and then what, right? Or spinal cord injuries or strokes. So this continuing ed really gave me a different perspective on, wow, I really miss a really important occupation, as we call that, something you have to do every day. It intrigued me, so I actually took additional continuing ed and then started my own business doing this in the Scranton, Pennsylvania area of the state. Scranton, if you've never been there, doesn't have a whole lot there. I'm originally from Long Island. It was supposed to be a college education and then back home, but that didn't happen. So when this opportunity here in Pittsburgh came up, I was very eager to take over as the director of the driving program, and then also be able to provide driving services. So that's kind of how I made my way here, and how I got involved in driver rehab. About our program, there are only two of us. It's myself and my colleague Jean. She is not an occupational therapist by background. She has a master's in rehab technology. So it's the two of us. We do everything from administrative, so if you call and it takes like a day or two for us to get back, it's typically because we're here, we're on the road, so just give us a day or two to get back to you, but we will eventually get back to you. As far as our services, we do all different things. We work with individuals who need adaptive equipment. So if there's any reason somebody has difficulty using the gas, the brake, the steering wheel, or any of their secondary controls, so turn signals, horns, wipers, we have equipment that can make that a lot easier or compensate for something. Let's say they have an amputation, this equipment can help them then drive despite having that amputation. We also do regular driver's training. So not your neurotypical teenagers, but we work with a lot of kids with autism, ADHD, anxiety, to get them behind the wheel and get them to get their license. What we find is 6 hours of like regular driver's ed and the way that they provide instruction does not meet that population's needs. So they come to us, we spend 40 to 50 to 60 hours with them, and our approach is a little bit different. So they typically do better with us. So right now I have a lot of kids with autism on my caseload. So we do regular driver's training also. Some of our clients who may have a stroke or whatever condition, a TBI, they don't need equipment, but they do need a little bit of a refresher, shall you say, behind the wheel. We will work with those individuals also. We also work with bioptics, so individuals who don't meet the state requirements to drive with just glasses. They have a telescopic lens on their regular glasses, and then they dip into that bioptic lens to actually drive. So they have a little bit of a set criteria by PennDOT as far as how many hours of driving they actually need with me before they can get their license. We also do evaluations for vehicle modifications. So if you use a scooter or a power wheelchair and you need to take that device with you into the community, we are the people who would write the prescription for that piece of that lift, or if it's an actual accessible van, the ramp, how you secure your device. So we do those evaluations also and make those recommendations. What else do we do? Our evaluation. So a couple of aspects of our evaluation. Some, it's just somebody had, like we were talking about before, a seizure. They took their 6 months off. They want to get back to driving. Doc is like, not sure if you should, not sure if you shouldn't, not sure if there's some residual things going on. So we get a lot of clients who've had some sort of medical situation, event happen, where they want to get back to driving. Doctor's not sure, so they'll come to us. We'll do our comprehensive evaluation, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then we can provide a report to the physician saying like, yes, we recommend driving, or no, we don't recommend driving, and here's why. Sometimes with the here's why, depending on the conditions, we might say, go see PT, go see speech, go see OT. So we've had a couple of clients where we refer them to other therapies and then tell them to come back for a re-evaluation in order to see if they can resume driving. At the end of the day, we do tell all our clients our recommendation is just a recommendation. We don't have the ability to reinstate a license, and we don't have the ability to revoke a license. So sometimes we'll get clients with a cognitive impairment, early dementia, a mild cognitive impairment. If our recommendation is not driving retirement, we provide that to the physician, and then the physician, we always say, have a follow-up conversation and see what your physician's final decision is. Same thing with reinstating. So we can evaluate and say, okay, yeah, like you look great on our clinical assessment, but that final decision is going to rest with the physician. Yeah.
And did you say, if I missed it, do you need a script or anything from the doctor to see you?
Yeah. So I'll go over that when I go through our process to schedule an evaluation. Okay. So we do evaluations to determine what we call fitness to resume driving, fitness to continue driving, or driving retirement. And then again, our evaluations to determine adaptive equipment needs. So as far as scheduling an appointment and kind of that whole process, typically clients can contact us. Anybody can make that initial contact. It does not need to be the physician who calls us. I do have some physicians. I have nurses. I have case managers, I have family members, I have clients themselves, I have Office of Vocational Rehab provides funding for individuals who are working or are looking to return to work. Sometimes they contact me, right? So anybody can make that initial phone call saying, hey, somebody's in need of driving services. What we then do, if it's not the client, we get in touch with the client. 3 things that we need from the client in order to schedule the initial appointment. One is going to be some intake forms. We typically send them electronically to an email address. They get filled out online. You hit submit, they come right back to me. For individuals who don't like technology or don't have email, we do have hard copies that we are more than happy to stick in the mail and do it old school style of mail it to you and you mail it back to us. We do need a physician referral. It has to say drive and evaluation and training. A lot of doctors, UPMC doctors, enter that into Epic because that's their system and they think we're UPMC, but we're not UPMC, so we don't use Epic. So a lot of clients call me up a little disgruntled because they're waiting for me to call them because the doctor said I put the referral in, I don't get that referral, somebody has to send it to me. So if you ever in need of driving services and your doctor says I put it in Epic, please tell them to fax it to me because I don't get it. So typically physicians will fax us a referral, and then we do need payment up front for the evaluation. That unfortunately has to be a check. We're at Pitt, but we still can't process credit cards for whatever reason, something I've been fighting for 3.5 years. So most clients will mail in a check. Once we have those 3 items, that's when we call you up to schedule the appointment. Typically I get asked, how long do I have to wait? It depends on time of year. Nobody wants to drive in January, so January I can get you in tomorrow. In the summer, it's typically about a week, week and a half, 2 weeks the most, right? So we're not like some doctor's offices where it's like you gotta wait 6 months. We're pretty quick to get you in. If you're there for a quick, hey, can I continue driving, get back to driving, it's a one and done. We fax the report to the doctor and you're on your way. If you need adaptive equipment, you do need additional training. And we get you scheduled right away for weekly sessions. We don't like gaps of time to go by because we want you to retain the skills and practice makes perfect and repetition is really important. So once you get in our office and you get on our schedule for training, it will be a weekly training schedule. Typically we train for 2 hours at a time. Typically down in Oakland, we have you come down to us. We don't just throw you into the heart of Oakland because nobody wants that. And a lot of people get a little like, oh, I don't know where to come if you're gonna make me drive in Oakland. What we typically do is we start in what we call zero traffic, zero demand. So the golf course section of Shenley Park, where there's absolutely nothing going on. And that's where we start, if we're determining fitness to drive, that's where we're gonna start that on-road assessment, or if you need equipment, that's where we're gonna start training you in the equipment. In the event you make a mistake, we're not worried about bad things happening or the pressures of other drivers and you're learning equipment. A big question that I get is, does insurance pay for this? And this is probably the only thing I hate about my job, and the answer is no. Insurance says it's not a medically necessary service, right? So it's not a medical service, it's kind of a, I want to drive. So unfortunately, insurance does not pay for it, Medicare does not pay for it, so it is an out-of-pocket expense. Some of our clients do find funding sources. So for example, our clients that work or are looking to return to work, they look through Office of Vocational Rehab. The Shazier Foundation has funded for some of our clients who have spinal cord injuries. The MS Society has provided money for an evaluation and some training. So point being is that we try to help you find resources to help defray the cost a little bit. With that said, as far as the adaptive equipment, if you do need training, we don't have you need 20 hours. Some other driver rehab programs will say you have to have 20 hours of training, and that's not true. Our philosophy is everybody is different. Everybody learns differently and at different rates, and we try to be mindful of expenses. So we 100% base the number of hours of training based off of what you need as the individual. So for example, I have some clients come in, we do the clinical assessment, we go on the road. Our on-road assessment for equipment really is day one of training, right? I don't expect you to know how to use it. Day one of training. After that first encounter, I will say like, okay, you need about 4 hours, or you might need about 10 hours. And it's an about, right? It's a guesstimate, and then we judge it as you go on. I have some clients who put this equipment in my car, they start driving, we drive through Shenley Park, we're driving through other parts of Oakland, we're on 376, heading up to 79, right? Like we're great. And I say to that person, let's start preparing for that road test, right? Like I'm not gonna waste your time or your money by having you come back for more training. You've driven everything and we're chatting and you did great. We have some people who take a little bit longer and that's okay. So again, point being, we just tailor that training 100% to what you need to start to prepare for the road test. So PennDOT, not my rules, PennDOT rules, in order for me to write a prescription for this equipment, you do have to take the PennDOT road test using the equipment. So you would use it in my car, because it's not in your car yet. So that's how everybody feels about PennDOT. Most people fall over when I say that. So as I was saying before, when we were having our little chit chat, we do meet you at PennDOT, we do show you the test route, we do teach you to parallel park, so that day of your road test, there's no surprises, right? We want you to feel comfortable. Once people pass that road test using the equipment, that's when we can provide a prescription for that equipment to be installed. As far as an installation perspective, we only can use certain places. They're called mobility equipment dealerships. So that's going to be like your Mobility Works in Monroeville. There used to be one in Robinson, but they closed. They actually joined with Monroeville. Or Keystone Coach Works down in Bethel Park. Those individuals have education training on how to properly install this equipment. They have standards that they have to meet every year for quality assurance. Part of the concern is it's tapping into the electronics of the vehicle, so we want to make sure that we are having the equipment installed by people who know what they're doing. So a Mobility Works or a Keystone Coach Works would then be in contact with you after I write that script, and they would be the ones that would coordinate with you to get your car there to have the equipment installed. So I always compare it like I'm the doctor and they're the pharmacy, right? I write the script and then they fill it. Any questions about any of that before I go into my equipment? I'll give you plenty of time afterwards to ask also.
When you were talking about the glasses, so my friend has macular degeneration, and her doctor, she bought those glasses that have the little binocs like up high.
Okay.
And then she moved to Florida, and then she found out they were illegal to drive with those in Florida.
In Florida. So different states have different policies. Pennsylvania, so some states have been doing bioptics for 20 plus years. Pennsylvania just recently approved it.
Oh, so when she moved back here from Florida, then she was afraid to wear them because she didn't know if they were illegal here or not. But she bought them in Pittsburgh from the specialist. But
Yeah.
So she would wear them, and they look like what the doctors, they had the little ones.
The little lens on the top, right? Like a telescopic
Because she could still read road signs and things when she wore those.
Yes, yep, yeah. Yeah, as I said, in Pennsylvania, we just recently, some states have been doing it for years, and some states, they don't allow it at all. It's a state-by-state thing. So, if it's something that she is interested in, again, that's something that we do provide services in, so you could direct her our way. But I know some people are, you go to another state.
Yeah, she's back here, so she doesn't drive, she can't drive after dark anymore, so she's kind of limited anyway.
Yeah, and with the bioptics, there are other regulations, like they can't drive highways, they can't drive certain times of day, so there are some PennDOT regulations around that. But okay, so I'm going to go over my equipment because this is the fun part of my job. I'll show you some pieces, and if you have any questions. So we have a couple of different types of equipment that we can issue. As far as the gas and brake is concerned, we do have a left foot accelerator. So think somebody who might have a right amputation or any difficulty for whatever reason with their right foot, we can use the left foot. Sensation has to be intact, right? So if somebody has neuropathy, obviously we're not going to give them a left foot accelerator because there's a chance there's neuropathy in that foot, right? So mostly left foot accelerators are going to be our right amputees. I have a love-hate relationship with left foot accelerators. So it's exactly what you think it is. Your normal gas pedal's here, your brake is in the middle, and then we put an extra pedal here, kind of like you would think like your clutch, to use that left foot as your gas, right? So now left foot is gas, and then you shift to the right for the brake, okay? Some states you can't issue a left foot accelerator due to pedal confusion. Pennsylvania, we can still issue them. Pedal confusion is our brain is programmed to go from gas to brake, especially when we need to quickly respond, right? We're programmed. When we have to go gas to brake, it's an opposite direction, and in those quick moments, sometimes we don't shift the correct way. We still shift left, and now we're hitting the side of the car as opposed to hitting the brake, and now we've hit the car in front of us, right? So with left foot accelerators, I get a lot of people that come in and they're like, I want a left foot accelerator. And I'm like, well, we're gonna see about that, because it's a whole new way of training your brain. And a lot of times, because we have that pre-established program, going to hand controls is a lot easier for somebody to use, right? But I always say, like, all right, let's give it a good old college try. Like, let's give it a whirl. So it's not off the table. It's just, we'll see how that is, right? Typically, most of our people do use hand controls. They're a lot easier just because it's a whole new way of learning. So this is what a hand control actually looks like. I'm gonna come in front of the table. When people get in my car and they see this, they're like, oh, that's it? I'm like, that's it. I think people think it's gonna be this like big contraption or something, but this is it, right? So it's pretty simple. Couple of aspects to it. So the first is gonna be this rod. This rod actually goes down to the brake pedal. On my brake, there's a bracket. So I pull this down and then I pop that hole onto the bracket. So when I use my hand control and I push forward for my brake, I literally am just depressing that brake with this rod. Do not take a broomstick and do it yourself with a broomstick, right? Because it's not secure. I've seen it. I had a spinal cord injury. Get out of his car. I was very confused. I went for a vehicle modification. He got a new vehicle and he had to transport, no, he needed hand controls installed in his new vehicle. So somebody who's been through our program has the equipment but needs new equipment, they have to get a quick evaluation by us just so we make sure everything is status quo before I write the script. So I went to his house to do a very quick evaluation for hand controls, and he wasn't home, so I called him. He's like, oh yeah, I'll be right home. I'm right around the block. I'll be there in 2 seconds. I'm like, okay. And he pulls up in his new vehicle. He has a spinal cord injury, so he has no use of his legs at all. And he opened his door and he was using a broomstick to use the gas and brake. Not safe, right? Because your broomstick can slide. I don't recommend it. But whatever, everybody has their own needs, I guess. So I was like, I'm glad we're getting hand controls installed. So anyway, so this gets securely attached to your brake. So when you push it, you're literally pushing the brake down. The gas component is electronic. So this gets plugged into a portal in our car, or a port on our car. And then what happens is you get in the car, if you need the hand controls, you turn the car on, you push a button that activates this and deactivates the regular gas pedal in the car. So once this is activated, you can hit that gas pedal all you want and nothing is going to happen, okay? It's all in the hand control at this point. So this goes down, this is plugged in, this gets mounted right underneath the steering wheel. Right, so you don't see this bar, it's underneath the steering wheel. All you see is this handle. And I tell people sitting in a class like this, picture where your turn signal is. This just is another handle underneath your turn signal. So it doesn't stick out really far, it doesn't take up a lot of room. It just looks like you have 2 turn signals. We have different types of hand controls. They're 2 words. So this is a push-pull. Every single one is going to be a push. Push is consistent for braking, right? We keep that consistent. So if we swap out the way you accelerate, we all know pushing is always brake. We don't want to confuse people. So we have a push-pull, so pretty simple. You push forward for brake, you pull back for gas, or reciprocal motion, easy to get. Every now and then you get somebody who doesn't like that. They can't form that grasp, their hand gets tired, whatever the reason might be. We have another one, it's called a push right angle. So you would push forward for brake, and then you would do a right angle motion with the handle for gas. And then the last one we have is a push rock. So again, push forward for brake. The handle's this way, so it's a different motion, a different wrist position, so they can pull back for the gas. We can mount these hand controls, so you can use them on your left hand, or we can swap them, and you can use them on their right hand. Most people like to steer with their dominant hand and use the hand control with their non-dominant hand. So we have the ability to not only switch up the style, but also flip-flop. Do you use it on the left or do you use it on the right? With driving, there's, just like when you rent a car, like the sensitivity of the gas and the brake, right? So that's a little bit of the learning curve, because if you just yank on this, you're going to quickly take off, and if you just push forward, it's like you just literally jammed your foot on the brake, right? So that's probably the biggest learning curve, is the sensitivity of the gas and brake using this, just like a regular, like if you were to rent a car. Anybody who uses a hand control absolutely has to use a steering device. I'm going to go over them. Our steering devices also come in handy for anybody who has difficulty using two hands on the steering wheel. So some of our strokes, if they have like left-handed creases, they only have the use of their right hand. These steering devices come in really handy for some of them. If we have a left or a right amputation, same thing, upper extremity amputation, steering devices come in really handy. Like our hand controls, if I were to show you my car, I have 4 brackets on my steering wheel. 2 on the right, 2 on the left, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom. Reason being, again, we want to meet everybody's needs, right? So our typical position, if we're using a left hand control, is a steering device at this 2 o'clock position on the steering wheel. But I guess some people whose arms get tired or they don't like it, so we can put it down lower, right? So point being is, again, we can switch things up to see what's going to fit you best.
Can you just walk me through, I'm just trying to imagine someone that's had a stroke and using one arm. So how can you accelerate and steer at the same time? Like you're pushing back, but also steering the wheel with one
So
hand?
like a stroke, with like a left hemi, they would use their right foot to drive.
So you would just have them use the foot for the gas
And
or
brake.
brake and
Yep.
then steer with one hand?
Yeah.
Okay, so as long as they can utilize their foot, then they're using the brake?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So like if
So
somebody,
they might need a left pedal if that's the case, if it's affecting the other side.
if it's affecting their right side,
Okay.
yeah, we could do a left
Okay.
pedal and a left steering device.
Okay.
If their left side's affected, we would use the right foot for gas and brake, and
Yeah.
then the right hand for steering.
Okay.
Anybody who cannot use their lower extremities due to whatever reason, amputation, spinal cord, or like neuropathy, those are the people that we're going to do the hand controls for. And again, anybody who has hand controls has to have a steering device.
Yeah.
Those are PEMDOT tools, and it does make driving a lot easier, especially when you're trying to turn. So typically, this is our most basic, common steering device. Most people do well with it. So this gets mounted into a bracket on my steering wheel, and what this does is it gives me really good control to turn one-handed. Otherwise, if you're driving one-handed and you're going around curves or making a turn, you get into this position where you can't go anymore, or you open up your hand, right? And at this point, you don't really have good control over the car, and then you have to re-grasp the steering wheel. So what this does, because of how it's positioned, you can just keep on turning all you want. Good control of the car. So this is our most basic. Every now and then I get somebody who can't form this grasp, or they don't like how hard it is, or whatever their story might be. So then we have this one, kind of similar, a different grasp, functions the same way, goes into the bracket, still really good control, a little bit softer. So we do have that as another option. Every now and then I had this new driver. He had cerebral palsy, so he needed a hand control because he couldn't use his lower extremities. He needed the hand control and he needed a steering device. With his CP, he was unable to grasp this one or this one. So then we went back to my bucket of fun, and we gave him this steering device. So this one, what's neat about it is it has this bar. So all of these are adjustable, right? So this bar was then pushed up against his hand a little bit, so that when his hand would go to slide, he would have something resisting from his hand totally sliding off, right? So people who might have a little difficulty with grasp, we have this option, which is helpful. And then every now and then we get somebody where all of those don't work. They might have difficulties with their wrist, stabilizing their wrist. They might have difficulties with their grasp. So then we have this one, and again, these are all adjustable to meet that person's grasp. And with these 2 pins underneath, there are times where you actually don't even need to hold it on, just because the pins can provide that support. So I've had a couple of people who need this one, and same thing. This just goes into the bracket, and then it's just nice continuous movement to control their vehicle, right? So lots of different steering devices to meet different people's needs as far as how much of a grasp and what type of grasp do they have to make sure they have good control of the car. Oftentimes, people who use a hand control still will use all their secondary controls normal, right? So because of where the hand control is, well, let's take a left hand. If you're using a hand control on the left side, it's close proximity to your turn signal, so most people can still use that turn signal. Sometimes I get people who can't reach that turn signal or don't want to let go of that hand control, or if we're using a right hand control, right, and steering, we might not be able to get to that turn signal. Or we might not be able to get the horn, because if you think about it, if I'm going to use my horn, there's a good chance I need to be steering and need to either be using my gas or brake, right? So how am I going to use my horn? Individuals who might have a stroke and don't have use of both of their hands and can't use their regular secondary controls, we have different types of steering devices where the secondary controls are built into that. So I'm gonna I had a girl who had a stroke, left side, unable to use at all, so she used her right foot for gas and brake, and we gave her one of these as for the steering device. So this gets plugged into the bracket on my steering wheel, so she can turn, but then these buttons have all the secondary controls. So this one in the middle would be the horn, the two going to the right and the left would be your turn signals, up would be your wipers, down would be your high beams. So literally, as she's driving, right at the tip of her finger are all the secondary controls, right? We don't have to worry about her being able to reach any of those. And then similarly, with our other equipment, just different types, again, to meet different people's needs, right? I've had some people who love this one. If I try to drive with this one, I got my wipers and my high beams going at the same time, because my grasp, how I hold things, it just hits the buttons where things are programmed. So this is an epic fail for me. For some people it works. This is very similar to our basic spinner knob, but again, all of the controls are programmed right here, right? So right there, tips of the finger, super easy to reach. Right, so we do have those options also, as far as equipment. Any questions on the steering devices, different types, who would need, who wouldn't need? I don't know if you have any questions.
I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, and again, we tell people, you know, the big thing with us is we try to figure out what meets that individual's needs, right? There's no one size fits all, it's very individualized. Other things that we can help you obtain, sometimes people just need a cushion, they might need a panoramic mirror. This is amazing. This actually is very dirty. This, if you open the car door, there's that little metal, it's a striker, where the door actually locks. This would go into that, that metal, I'll call it a ring for all purposes. And then what you can do with this is, instead of pulling on your car door to get out of the car, if you need something to push off of, right? Because holding onto the steering wheel, that move's not safe. Car doors, I've seen a lot of people use a door and it comes flying back onto them, and now we have, you know, other issues to be concerned about. So this you can buy on Amazon. This is probably the only thing I would recommend you could get on Amazon, and I'll give you my Amazon lecture in a second. But you put that in the striker, that metal ring that's on the side of the car when you open the door, and then you actually have like a handle, something that you could push off of to get into the car. It also has a seatbelt cutter, right? So in the event of an emergency, there's a way to cut your seatbelt. And then the final emergency, if you're ever in a situation where you need to break glass, the metal in here can also break a window if ever needed. But we recommend these, again, for people who have difficulty getting in and out of a car, so they have something to push off of that's sturdy, solid, will support them, and isn't going to result in some further injury. So these cushions, extra panoramic mirrors are all things you can get on Amazon. If you go on Amazon, like some of my clients, you will find this equipment there. And one of the big things I always tell healthcare professionals or students that I'm presenting to, or people themselves, is just because it's on Amazon doesn't mean you should get it. They're called portable hand controls, and they're called portable for a reason. They are not made to the same durability as our equipment. They're collapsible, they have joints, right? I've had some people actually tell me they have broken while they are using them, right? So not to the same quality as our equipment is. The other reasons I don't advise people to buy them is, in addition to the durability, as I said before, we have to send this to specific places for the installation. We don't send it to like Billy Bob's garage down the block because we don't know if they know how to properly install it. For your safety, we want to make sure it's installed properly. So we send it to a mobility equipment dealership, right? So from a safety perspective, if you buy it on Amazon and go to Mobility Works is going to say, I cannot install that for you. It has to come from a prescription from me, and it has to be of quality equipment, not something bought off of Amazon. So now you are going to take it to Billy Bob's garage down the block or have your neighbor install it, and it might not be installed correctly, so there's another safety concern. The third aspect why I tell people don't buy it on Amazon is, in order for me to write a prescription for this equipment, I told you you have to take the road test. When you take the road test, your license gets codes put on it. They're numbers 3 and 4. So right now, anybody who wears glasses or contacts has a number 1 on their license, indicating they use glasses. 3 and 4 is what allows you to legally drive with the equipment. If you buy it on Amazon and have your next door neighbor install it, you're not coded to drive with it, so technically you're driving illegally with it, which I don't advise anybody to do. Sometimes I get people be like, well, this, right? Can I just buy this myself? Like this, honestly, anybody, I can install this on my vehicle, right? At the end of the day, you need a coded license to drive with this. So even though you can get this on Amazon, pretty simple, pretty harmless as far as installing it yourself, you don't have a coded license, so you're technically driving illegally. You say you buy it on Amazon, and you're like, yes, I need my license coded, I'm just gonna call PennDOT. PennDOT will not let you schedule a medical road test with adaptive equipment without going through a program like ours. And their little insurance of that is, I have to write a letter of enrollment saying you are in my program, you've done your training, this is the equipment you use, and this is why you use it, in order for them to authorize permission for you to take that road test. So you can't just call up and be like, hey, schedule me for my road test. They're gonna say no, and then when you come to me, I'm gonna say you need this. You know, so, and I know there are people out there driving, because some clients have come to me, and like life happens, right? I've had some clients where they've been in very unfortunate situations and they needed to still be able to get around. So temporarily they drove with portables, and I'm like, well, I'm glad you're here, doing it the right way with good equipment. But as I said, just because it's out there on Amazon, you know, don't be inclined to go that route. And I think a lot of people, and this goes back to spreading the word, there are people out there driving with it. And when I've done presentations, I've had other people in the audience say, well, my friend or my neighbor or somebody didn't go through a program, they bought it themselves, so I always like to give that education, and say, hey, spread the word, share the word, especially that legal aspect, right? Like, we want to make sure everybody's driving legally. Nobody wants any additional nonsense, as far as driving illegally. Let's see, what other equipment do we have? That's probably about the extent of it. Any questions?
What about the shifting device? Shift from
The
park?
gear shift?
Yeah.
So the company that makes our equipment, they do make different adaptations that you can put on the gear shifter to help shift. So we do have that. So what we have is kind of the most that most people need, right? Every now and then we get somebody who they might need an additional accessory. So for example, one person they were able to do all their secondary controls, but the horn, they were having trouble with the horn. So there's a horn button, it's a little bracket that sits here, and then the horn's right here. Right, so we don't have that because it's not something very common that a lot of our clients need, but there are other pieces of equipment out there in the event you have trouble shifting gears. There's something that is manufactured to help with that. If you have trouble just doing your horn and you don't want one of those steering devices, there's something for that. So if you have the old school emergency parking brake where you have to use your left foot and push down on it, and you can't, or like you're in amputation, they have equipment to assist with that. So there are other pieces of equipment out there. It's just that becomes like a individual basis for us as opposed to having it on stock and in supply. But yeah, there are things to help with the gear shift.
I mention that because I worked for a while at the auto auction. When some of the new cars come in, like BMWs, they have all kinds of weird shifting things, and some of them had a dial in the center, sort of like you're setting your washing machine for you're gonna do sheets or towels.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so difficult for even the people that were pretty experienced to know where to set that dial. And it's, even if you can feel it, on many of them you actually have to look at it to make sure it's set at the right place.
Mm-hmm.
Then the absolute danger is you can inadvertently, on some of them, put them in the park, and you're driving down the road at 25 miles an hour, and you put the thing in the park, guess what?
Yeah.
Yeah, trouble.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing where having my background as an occupational therapist helps, right? Because something I do, it's breakdown of tasks, like where are your difficulties, so on and so forth. How can we adjust that? How can we figure out a different way to use it, right? But then, as you said, like you can accidentally just put it into park when you're driving, anybody could do that, right? So when we talk with people about cars, because a lot of times the conversation is, my car's a little bit older, do I get a new car if I'm going to invest, put in this equipment in, or do I put it in an older car? So a lot of times we'll have conversations with people about like what type of cars are good, what we recommend, what we don't recommend, depending on the client. Some don't think about the transfer aspect, right? So if we have a spinal cord injury, can they get into a higher car, a lower car, right? Sometimes people don't think about those things. I see a lot, and it breaks my heart, our clients that need to transport a scooter or a wheelchair. Some of them can ambulate in the household, right, but they need it in the community. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll go out, they'll buy a new car, then they have me come in after the fact to try to recommend some sort of lift. And the very sad news I have to break to them is that based on the car you bought and your mobility device, and typically your power wheelchairs is where I run into this problem, there's nothing that I can recommend that is compatible with your device and your vehicle. And a large portion of that is going to be, I get people who get like a sedan, a four-door, and they'll just put a hitch on it. Well, one, some cars are not deemed able to tow. So if your owner's manual says towing is not permitted, even if you think you can add a hitch, and you might be able to, I can't write that because in your owner's manual, it says you can't tow, right? So I have to follow that. I then have individuals who, great, you can tow, but the tongue weight of the car, so how much weight that car can take at that hitch, that wheelchair with that lift sometimes is pushing 600 to 700 pounds, which exceeds the weight that the car can take. Typically it's like 200, 300 pounds. So now I can't recommend an exterior lift. And we have interior lifts, but depending on the type of car you have, so if you have a sedan with a trunk, I can't recommend an interior lift. Or if you have a car with a hatchback, great, but how much space is in there also is going to be a factor for, can we get the lift and your device in there, right? So a lot of times, and again, it breaks my heart, I'll go to people and they're so excited, like, oh, I just bought this, crossover SUV, it's a Kia whatever, with the Soul, with the back, great, or tracks. I get tracks all the time. And when I hear they were tracks, I'm like, oh, like I don't even have to do any research and figuring out, like I know they're not gonna be able to use it, right? So what we try to do is really educate people on, if we know they're gonna be getting a lift, hey, like let's talk about vehicle first. Or if they're going to be in the market for a new vehicle to install the equipment, we really try to be like, okay, like here are some things you consider. Can you get in and out of the vehicle, right? So when you go look for the vehicle, try getting in and out. If you have a device, can you store that device? Are you able to operate the secondary controls, right? When I got our new car for the program, our gear shift to reverse, you have to push a button and push forward. It's a Nissan Rogue. I sat in the parking lot for 30 minutes. I had no clue how to get the car into reverse, and I couldn't pull forward because there was a car there, right? So I tell people, make sure you, one, not only know how to use all those things, but you can use that, right? Our other car, you have to, for the gear shift, you have to push a button underneath, and you kind of need a lot of strength in your fingers So if we have somebody who has decreased grasp or a weak hand, you know, so we do try to educate. And then again, sometimes with some people, if they have a vehicle, how can we work with you in that vehicle? I had a girl, she needed adaptive equipment. She was taking her road test, and where she was taking it, she would have to get in the car herself and start the car, so on and so forth. She had very short arms, and we have a push button to start and stop the car, where she couldn't reach that. And I previously have been turning the car on and off for her. So for her road test, I'm in PennDOT, she's outside. So we got like a stick with a soft top on it, so that she could use that to start the car, right? So again, we do try to help problem solve where able, but some situations, you know, as much problem solving and advice that we can give, sometimes there are no solutions, but yeah, it's good considerations.
Yeah, there was a series of cars once that you had to coordinate your foot on the brake and all sorts of things just to get the thing in gear. And finally, from my experience at the auction, none of the newer cars have those weird combinations. But even people that are pretty smart, you know, PhD and such, would get in some of those older cars.
You couldn't even get them started, right?
So the manufacturers seem to have adjusted, but they sounds like they still have to move ahead with looking at ways to adapt the driver's compartment or make the driver's compartment adaptable, such as you could put a driver's chair in there that would connect everything. Some of them just seem to be complicated. There's 8 ways to move the seat on down, there's 8 ways to move it forward and back and all that sort of stuff. And some of them you can't, being longer legs, some of them I couldn't even get in.
Yeah.
Some of the newer, like Toyota, I think the RAV4, the rear door doesn't open enough that even mobile people have a hard time getting in the rear seat. So it sounds like you have quite a challenge with your job.
We do, and what also I think it's like a catch-22 is good, but it's bad. Like cars becoming more and more technology, right? So one, more prone to break, but two, also can become very overwhelming with like how much technology is in a car. You know, and I get some people who have older cars and they get in my car and they're just, in my car, it's a 2023, so it's newer, but it's not by any means the bells and whistles. And that technology is just like, it's overwhelming. Or like we have a backup camera and they're like, whoa, like what's that? And how do I use that? And they're like, I can't use that. And I'm like, that's fine, you know? So, you know, as cars continue to evolve, I find they get smaller and there's more and more technology. So with technology, with all of my drivers, no matter their age, there are some things that I think are beneficial and are good for safety features, right? Like your blind spot indicators, like those little lights that light up, keep them on. I think they're helpful. But I always tell people, still check your blind spot. So if they're not orange or yellow or whatever color, still check, because they could not be working, right? And there could be a car there. Lane keep assist, right? So typically with the lane, if you deviate, like the steering wheel will shift, vibrate a little bit, a light will flash on your dashboard. I typically tell people, keep that on, right? Because that little feedback of that wheel shifting can catch your attention. Some of the other stuff on cars, I'm like, just turn it off, you know, like you don't even need that. My personal car's got stuff, I'm like, I don't even know what that button does, and I don't even want to know. By our emergency parking brake, because our parking brake is on that middle console, it's a button you pull up. There's another button that says auto hold. And people are like, what's that? I'm like, I know, but we're not talking about it, right? Not important, not necessary. And I've tried actually using it while I drive, and it actually screws me up also. So, you know, as cars evolve, they are getting smaller, they're getting more technology, and I think it can be, you know, it can be overwhelming.
Do you do anything about the newer cars with the computer screens? That's just out of your bailiwick.
So I like the
actual screen.
Yeah. So what we do all of our training in our car, we don't do it in the client's individual car. But I know a lot of people do ask me about like the backup camera, the lines, like what does all that mean, right? And then depending on what type of car they get, we'll determine, you know, do they have it, do they not have it?
Well, like almost all the new cars have the computer screen.
Yep. Yep. The
So
navigation.
the people that have limited use of their arms or whatever.
Yeah. So again, that's where we could be creative, right? If they're having trouble accessing, they can't reach, like that one lady that I had. What can we give them that can help bridge that gap of them not being able to do it and being able to do it?
Because is there a way even for like say the radio or something, or you could talk to your like the voice commands for your radio, like with, I don't know, but some of the newer cars might have something
Yeah.
like that.
Yep. Yeah, and I know on like ours, like you can connect the phone. Not that I encourage
Right.
people to use the phone, but like if you need to take a call or whatever,
Right.
don't pick up your phone, don't be playing with it. Like use the buttons, right? So become familiar with some of those features. If you plan on taking a phone call in the future as you're driving.
My sister-in-law just bought a Trax.
Uh-huh.
And my mother's 95, so my sister would take her somewhere, and she has the folding rollator.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister said there was barely enough room
Yeah.
to get the rollator into the back of that Trax.
Yep. Cars are becoming, as I said, they're becoming smaller and smaller, and as I said, people who need to take mobility devices, as I said, if I could catch them before they get the vehicle, just for some considerations, and it's funny, right? Because for me, it's always on the forefront of my mind, right? Because it's what I do every day, but most people don't go and think about these things. Like I had one young lady, she's a senior in high school, she's a spinal cord injury, petite little thing, and she has one of those wheelchairs that you could disassemble and throw into the car. And a lot of people, spinal cord injuries, they have no trouble with that wheelchair, right? Because it's lightweight, so on and so forth. She just, in my car, because we practiced all the time, because of the height of my car and where the wheelchair was, she didn't have enough strength to heave-hove it. So they were talking about cars for her, and I said, get her in the car and see if she can manage that device, So my recommendations with everybody is, think long-term, right? We're all getting older, right? We have a Nissan Rogue, which I typically drive, which is a little bit higher. My colleague, we were gifted a car, right? So if anybody's gonna give you a free car, you're gonna say thank you. But it's a Volvo S9, it's a little bit sportier, and it's low to the ground. So some of our clients can get in it, some of our clients can't get out of it, right? So I always say, think long term. Again, none of us are getting younger. Can I get in? Can I get out? In the future, might I have a problem? If I ever need a walker, am I going to be able to get that in my car? Do I have space for that? Or, if I have a condition where I might need a scooter in the future, what's my space like for, for something like that? Can I put on a hitch to my car?
When you're talking about the cars, what I've noticed is the seats are now a little further away from the door frame. So for me, when the seat was right there, you could kind of put your body in and swing in, but now you can't do that.
There's a gap, yeah.
Right? And so my sister was looking for something for my mom, so my sister took all the measurements of the tracks. She went to the car show, and she's measuring all the cars to see which ones were a little bit lower, easier across here. And then she found several, and she went and got one, and my mother can get in and out of it with no problem.
Perfect.
But everybody can't do that either. But it was that thing. It was that sometimes it's just that lip over.
Yeah.
Because they didn't used to be that far from the door frame.
Yep.
And if you don't ever have an issue, you don't pay attention.
Correct.
You don't realize.
Yep. And I never did, right? Until I got into this, never thought twice about any of it. Again, as an OT for 18 years, I never even thought about can people drive or, again, the standard car we had in the rehab unit, it's the standard car that you buy from, the main company, and they're all the same, right? It's not that person's car. I had to laugh because my dad, both of my parents actually, my dad had a hip replaced actually this past January, my mom had both knees replaced, and they're on Long Island, so I went out to help them, given my background. My dad's very stubborn and he wasn't very good about hip precautions, so I went to make sure he listened to my mother and keep prevent a divorce from happening for all purposes. But I laughed because nowadays with orthopedic elective surgery, sometimes they send you home day of, so it's you get your surgery, PT walks you down the hall, walks you back, great, OT shows you equipment if you need it, and now you're going home. And I remember both of my parents, they got to the car and they were like, now what? Because insurance and healthcare has changed. It's no longer if you had a hip or knee in the past, you would go to rehab and you would practice your car transfer, so I don't know why I started talking about this. I think getting in and out of cars, but again, you know, my fault when I did car transfers back in rehab, it was here's your half a car, can you get in, can you get out, here's techniques, but like my dad's a very tall guy and he has a RAV4 and they're getting a little bit more smaller, you know, so getting in and out is, you know, is something really to consider, you know, when you're looking for cars, and a big factor. But
I want to step back a minute again to the dash. It seems like manufacturers are all hopped up on these 150 different ways to have something on the dash. And me being old-fashioned, the first car I bought had a speedometer and a gas gauge.
and that's all you need, right?
Well, windshield wipers and turn signals.
Yeah.
But it seems now, unless you've got 137 gadgets, 136 of which you don't need, there, many of them I've looked at, there is no default simple screen.
No.
And how, it would seem to me that organizations like yours should be pushing for that thing, a default simple screen. Because why do you need to worry about how many Sears things or how many radio stations you're getting? You want to drive down the road and go to the grocery store and get a loaf of bread, quart of milk.
Yep.
What do you need all of that for? Then there's the other thing, is the way the flat screen is on many of these. You can't read the screen when the sun is in a certain angle.
Yep.
We saw that on some of the first ones up at the auto auction. They're trying to drive and they're putting their hands to block the sun to be able to read the screen.
Yep.
Oh, what is that? That's the speedometer. No, that's the odometer. No, that's the tachometer. What's that do? We don't know what this does.
Yeah. No, it is hard. And I agree. There's a lot of technology in the car. You know, so like my new drivers with autism or ADHD, I'm like, we're not looking at any of that, right? Like you don't need to know that. You know, like I point out to them like, here's your speed, here's your miles, here's your gas tank, like all of this stuff. And even with them in the beginning, my car that I use for training, as I said, it's not bells and whistles. So it's old style. It has the knobs for your thermostat, right? And the fan. It's not buttons, which I appreciate. You know, so in the beginning, when I'm training them, I'm like, okay, I'll take care of all of this. You know, if the windows start to fog up, we'll eventually get there. But I try to keep it simple for them because you're right, like 99% of that, you know, we don't need, and it's all just a distraction. And like, you gotta flip through screen after screen to get to what you want, you know? I'm not a huge fan. I think some technology in cars these days is beneficial, right? The safety features, but all that extra stuff, like I'm not a big fan of it. I don't push any of it. And that's why I said, like on their road tests, if people are parallel parking, we teach them a way using a camera. But if I get somebody who's like, I know how to parallel park, I just need to dust the cobwebs and practice, and I cannot use that camera, I'm like, go for it. Like if you can do it without it and you're comfortable and you can get it and you can recall the technique, like awesome. Like let's do it that way.
And I think some companies are different. There's some that go for all the technology, then some that are a little more basic
little bit,
too.
yeah.
So you just have to look at what
That's
you're
what, like our Nissan, again, very basic. You know, our seat, you got the bar underneath that you gotta pull. You know, I get the new kids in the car and they're like, where are the buttons? I'm like, nope, like underneath the seat, there's a bar, pull it up and scoot yourself forward, you know, so, you know, it's what you're
some
saying.
Subarus are pretty like,
A little bit more
basic, or some Toyotas and base models or whatever. Just depends what you want, I guess.
Yeah.
You know?
And again, it goes to like going, checking out the car. Can you get in? Can you use things? You know, is there too much to it? Do you need a more basic model? You know, because with old cars, there's all different models and a lot more in it when you get to the fancier models.
So when you think big picture, this is just on average from start to finish. You're starting with you're in your car now that's adapted. A couple months, a few months? Because it probably depends on the dealer, not the dealer, but you know, the guy getting the parts to do the car and scheduling and all that, but.
So once you get in, right? So some people take a little bit to fill out the papers and get them back to us, but once you get in for that initial evaluation, we get you on our training. I would say the whole process, is about 3 months, give or take, right? So some people need extra training. I mean, it's gonna take a little bit longer. We have to schedule through PennDOT for their road test. So depending on how booked out, like Bridgeville is typically about 2 weeks booked out. If I go up to like Beaver, I could get you in tomorrow, right? So depending on the DMV, that could be a variable also. And then in addition to PennDOT processing that paperwork, right? Because as I said, I write a letter saying, hey, you're ready for your road test, give us authorization. So there's one medical unit, one person in the entire state of Pennsylvania that does that. So depending on how many papers are sitting on her desk, sometimes she gets those turned around pretty quick. Sometimes you have to give her grace and give her a couple of days to get that turned around. So I would say about 3 months is pretty average.
And then, oh, go ahead.
No, it's good. So when you, because you say it's out of pocket, right, most of it. Is there a flat fee, or does it go by how much time it takes, or how many things you have to?
Yeah, so good question. So as far as the evaluation, there's 2 components to it. So we do a clinical assessment on everybody. I didn't talk about that. Our clinical assessment, we check out your vision, your visual skills, visual, perceptual, cognitive, and then your physical skills, including reaction time. If all looks good there, we then take you out on the road. So that entire evaluation, the 2 parts, that's $400. Training then is $150 an hour. And again, we judge that 100% on what that person needs.
How
Good question.
far of a region do you cover?
So we get clients all the way up from Butler, all the way down to like Washington. We get that Beaver. I have one kid in Edinburgh, which is almost like 5 miles from Youngstown, Ohio. So we get people coming from all over. In certain situations, some people are like, can you travel to us? Or like, I really don't want to drive in Oakland. We will travel to people. We do tack on a travel fee just for our time, our miles and gas, especially these days. So if we can accommodate that, for training, we will. But yeah, we cover a pretty good area.
Bit of area, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned Johnstown earlier, do they have a place in Johnstown?
There's a driver rehab program. There's one in Johnstown, there's one in Erie, and then all the other ones are like more central and eastern part of the state. There's a handful of programs. There's one in Hershey, one in Philly.
It's interesting that the way Johnstown has been shrinking, that there would be something like that there.
Yeah. They're a traditional driver's ed school also, so they offer regular driver's ed in addition to driver rehab services.
Do they have to take the driver's test near where they live, that at their DMV, or they can take it anywhere like near you, or?
They can, so we tell people you can take it at any DMV. Some of the DMVs, we know the test routes, some we don't. So if it's not one we frequent, so for example, I had a kiddo taking it up in Beaver, I didn't know the test route. So we can't really help too much. We typically recommend Penn Hills or Bridgeville. Both of them are very familiar with our program, very familiar with the whole medical unit process. Bridgeville's probably my favorite because of how they line you up to take your road test, so on and so forth. And again, they know our program, they know you've trained with us, so I feel like they have a little grace at times. Other DMVs aren't as familiar, so like when I go to Butler, like I have to tell them, all right, like you gotta fill out this form, you gotta send that form into DMV, like, right, so I gotta walk them through the process. And again, we don't know all the test routes, like Allison Park, I know is pretty close to here, like we know Allison Park's test route, we also know there's one very grumpy guy there who gives road exams, so we always are like, hey, like you have like a very, very strict person, like speed limit is 25, do not do 26, right? Whereas like at Bridgeville, like you could be doing like 27, 28, and they're okay with it, right? So we've learned, where the easy people are. But again, like we are willing to go wherever you want to go. We'll just provide our, hey, like you might consider this, but if you don't want to, that's 100% your choice.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I think it's been a great discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you very
yeah.
much, Melissa.
Thanks for having
Yeah.
me. I will leave these. This is just general information, talks a little bit about our different services, how to contact us. So I'll leave them with you. If you need more copies, feel free to photocopy.
Yeah.
So if you ever have any questions or need any services, we get some people who are just like, hey, I'm getting a little bit older and I want to make sure I'm still safe to drive, right? I want to be aware of my driving, or hey, I want to get a baseline at this point. So like in 10 years, like if I'm having trouble, right, is there a change in my driving? So if ever there's a time you need anything, any difficulty driving for any reason at all, definitely feel free to reach out. And your main take home is if you ever need equipment, do not buy it on Amazon. I'm a big Amazon fan, but do not buy that on
So
Amazon.
Melissa, what, my